Welcome to the PricePlow podcast on the road today in Houston. Welcome. Thank you for joining, Shawn.
Love it.
Dustin from NNB Nutrition.
Us.
I'm super excited for this one.
This has been a long time coming. We have, Shawn, you've been on our podcast many times, but there's been a lot of updates, including bringing in Dustin Elliott, formerly of the Vitamin Shop and some other incredible brands. So we had Dustin on actually earlier this year, and now we get to hear what you've been doing with NNB Nutrition. Seems like there's a lot of growth. There's a lot of things planned, including an ingredient.
Cool things.
Yes.
I'm so excited for this because over my 5 years of being at PricePlow now, I have gotten to watch a lot of great podcasts of Shawn's, but I've never gotten to be on one with Shawn. Oh, so really? I'm super excited to sit down. Yeah, I never gotten to be on with you. So
okay, cool.
And it was funny. I was joking with Dustin. The last podcast Dustin did was our podcast.
Was with you guys.
So that was like a 20-minute episode. So we're going in deep today.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so gentlemen, what brings us all together here in Houston, Texas?
Well, Wayne, first off, I'll mention Dustin, and I met him at SupplySide. He came in for the Vitamin Shop, and it was NNB as well as TSI at the same table, and my Ingenious Ingredients crew. And as soon as he left the room, I looked at everyone, and I'm like, we need to hire that guy. I was so blown away about he was just so sharp. Knew all the trends, obviously looks fit. He's energetic. And man, I was so dead on with that because ever since we've hired him, it just feels like we're growing like crazy. Everything I talked to Dustin about, he makes out lists. He's on it. He's just a machine. And he eats, breathes, sleeps the supplement industry. And that's how I am. And to have someone working with me doing this, I can't even tell you how exciting it is to have him on board with NNB. And it just further reinforces who we are and our commitment to growth and excellence.
Mm-hmm. So Dustin, what is your official title with NNB? What are you doing? What's your day-to-day like?
Chief Brand Officer. So my day-to-day, there's a few components there. One is the overall strategy for NNB. So we have a lot of capabilities that we have, a lot of great ingredients, but the messaging just hasn't quite been translating to the rest of the industry. What we can do, what we're able to do, who we are, what we stand for. So obviously being in charge of the brand management, that's the message that I'm trying to convey to the rest of the industry. The other component of it is, with my background, I've worked for a contract manufacturer, I've worked for a retailer, I've worked for a brand, I've done D2C, I've sold into retailers. So there's a lot of strategy that I can employ that not only supports NNB in pursuing customers in these different avenues, but also just supporting our customers and what the ingredients can do for them in all these different avenues. So those are the two major components of my job. And then I joke about it. The other major component of my job is, Shawn has a track record with his industry for just creativity. Not only with the social media, not just with the ingredients, but just creativity for just brand strategy and direction in general. And my job is just to sort of capture his thoughts and then funnel it into reality, and which has been huge and beneficial for NNB. So everything from our social media strategy to how we're portraying our company, how we're getting the messaging out there. And then the one major factor within this industry that a lot of other raw material companies don't address is how do you build a demand for your ingredients? Everybody's trying to sell ingredients, but how do you actually build demand for it? Because the brands always say the same thing. Okay, that science is cool, but nobody's asking for it, right? And so that's another part of my job, probably the most difficult part and the most nuanced because it's not cut and dry. There's an artistry to it. But how do I get more people wanting NNB ingredients?
I love that as an introduction. What I also love is that you met each other at SupplySide. I'm not sure if it was SupplySide West or which one it was, but we are coming up on SupplySide West 2024. Yeah. And it basically takes over our lives for multiple months. And for ingredient suppliers, probably half the year and everything. Yes. So a lot of this is going to be catered towards what we're doing at SupplySide West and what you are excited to talk about leading up to SupplySide West as it publishes. So can you give us some of the...
Yeah. I mean, like I told you before, for us in our industry, this is our Super Bowl. There is other shows. There's SupplySide East, there's XPO West, all this stuff that we can go to, but there is nothing Nothing on the, like, this literally is 10x, and that's not hyperbole, to everything else. The investment, the amount of people that we'll have, the booth, the swag, the messaging, like there's so much to this. I mean, even the calendar, you know, is built out months ahead in terms of where we'll meet as a team, parties we'll have to go to, customers. There's just so much to this one. And so we get excited about this because it's our opportunity, speaking of excellence, for us to show our excellence. Each year, we want to level up. We want to show the customer, these brands in particular, that we are the one to beat. Every year, we want a bigger, better booth. We want better sell sheets. We want better messaging. We want more people at our booth that also display excellence, like Dustin. And every year, we're hiring those people. We're bringing them on board. And everyone's seeing it. Everyone's seeing it in the industry. And this year is no exception. So we do now have an ingredient that I've been working on for years, Dileucine, and that's exciting. So NNB is keeping that one internal. And obviously, as you know, that's now the gold standard in muscle protein synthesis. So we're going to have messaging around being number one in MPS. And the other one, we have a study that's coming out in about 2 weeks. So maybe when this airs, we'll have it. Yeah. Dihydroberberine, which is really the gold standard in GDAs. Mm-hmm. That is going to be number one in GLP-1. And we're excited about that. Obviously, this is the first time in history, I believe, when a pathway is known by everyone. Everyone knows GLP-1. You've heard of course, like the different pharmaceuticals in that area. But because there's so many coming out, like people are actually understanding the pathway, talking about the pathway, what's the newest one in GLP-1, that the lay person knows it. And that is very rare. And so now we can finally talk about a pathway instead of comparing ourselves to pharmaceuticals, which we're not allowed to do. We always have our hands tied behind our back on that one.
That's a really good point. Like GLP-1, you don't ever hear people talking about AMP-K or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Like, I never thought of that.
Can I ask, what does number one in GLP-1 mean?
We believe very strongly, and the data in a few weeks is going to back that up. And we believe this because berberine already had data on GLP-1, and berberine is going to convert to dihydroberberine and then convert back to berberine at plasma. So basically, whether you're taking dihydroberberine or berberine, they're both going to end up as berberine and plasma. The difference is going to be bioavailability, side effects, bioindividuality, and some of the, gut microbiome, those differences. You guys know all about that. Mm-hmm. So what we believe we can show is that the GLP-1 agonism is going to be greater than anything else out there. And we believe we're going to best, well, I don't want to, again, compare ourselves to anything like maybe that we're not supposed to compare ourselves to, but I'll leave that to consumers. But there's certainly, you're seeing probiotics and other things that are talking about, agonism of GLP-1. We believe we're going to just destroy that.
Okay, so when we talk about GLP-1, obviously the elephant in the room is semaglutide, a drug sold as Ozempic.
I didn't say that.
Okay, well, the PricePlow podcast, we are cool to say these things. One of the benefits of these quote-unquote benefits, one of the reasons people get really interested in these drugs, they know about the mechanism, but it's really because it makes them satiated. Mm-hmm. Do you think dihydroberberine is going to show any level of satiation as well? Oh, okay. He said that quickly. Very cool. Yeah. I did see that. I did see it in the animal data, but I wasn't sure if there's any human data on that, or at least. Yeah.
And I wonder how much I should say about this part.
When this podcast goes out, hopefully this will all be already public. So I don't know if that helps you with it.
Well, I'm working on supportive nutrients that are going to have complementary mechanisms of action for an expanded version of dihydroberberine. I'll say that right now. I don't want to say much more than that, but
we're testing for appetite in the human clinical. So that'll be one of the measures.
I can definitely understand. I can understand the positioning and like the nuance to saying you're number one in GLP-1, especially when it comes to nutraceuticals. Like there's nothing that, like, I believe in berberine and I believe that pathway. It gets very difficult when you start comparing it to things outside of nutraceuticals. Yep. But it's a really hot button topic. People were calling berberine, nature's Ozempic. And I don't necessarily have a problem because we understand like the differences between drugs and nutraceuticals now. Yeah. Like what literally makes one different than the other. Obviously, it plays on that pathway. I don't have a problem talking about it being number one in nutraceuticals.
Because there's also availability though, because you have to remember the cost of the nutraceuticals and then the access. Yeah. So with dihydroberberine, what we're saying is that of something that's over the counter, widely available, easy to access within everybody's price point, we're going to be the most available GLP-1 support that there is, right? Because there isn't easy access to some of these drugs, prescription requirements, cost. If you're not middle or upper class, you're not going to have access to it. So there's the availability aspect to us making that claim as well. Everybody's going to have the opportunity to have blood sugar control support at a high level.
Yeah. And one of the things I see with some of the users of semaglutide is that it almost seems like it's too powerful for some people. And a lot of people don't want to get Ozempic face, for instance. We just want a little bit of light satiety.
I was just going to say that there's far less side effects going this direction. Again, I don't want to spend too much time comparing to the drugs, but certainly we feel that this is the safest path to go the nutraceutical path. Because there are a lot of side effects and certainly costs, as pointed out.
But my point, the only point to kind of going down the path is to note, to people listening, that I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that this nutraceutical is very powerful in massaging a specific pathway. Yep. That is, I think, responsible. And that pathway, I think that a lot of people know GLP-1 because of pharmaceuticals and think of it as a very powerful pathway, which it can be when you're adding it exogenously. But talking about a nutraceutical that just kind of exploits this pathway is not to say that it's going to be doing the types of things like giving you Ozempic face. Right.
100%.
And it's funny, as we were coming in today, we were talking about my weight loss. And I was explaining to you.
I was just going to ask you, so I can turn this podcast on you, Ben, because you did a great video early on when we were working on dihydroberberine, and you talked about you couldn't keep weight on. I remember doing that. And then we were also talking about my video that was in the hotel room with my dog on my lap that someone had a problem with. Yeah. Well, it's funny. But going to, the question with you, Ben, is you're using it now. And what are your results with it now?
So it's really funny because you talk about my original video, which back then I was using 300 milligrams. This is what NNB was sending me to try. And so I was taking that 2 to 3 times a day. And back in the day, like hardcore bodybuilding, it was you took GDAs to get more food in to put on more size. And that was my mindset. And the hilarity of it was I have a video where I compared 300 milligrams of dihydroberberine versus a full stack. It was Revive MD's glucose. Nothing against them. Dihydroberberine at 300 milligrams dropped my blood sugar more than 6 capsules of a GDA. It's very strong. And the funny thing is now I use 100 milligrams the whole day. And it helps me with a ton. I hate to sound like someone moving snake oil or whatever, but I use it no matter what phase I'm in. It helps me lose weight more. It helps me put weight on in a better fashion on the way back up.
Yeah. If you're touching carbs, it makes sense if you really want to smash carbs or if you want to drop. So it does make sense in both.
It's that whole nutrient partitioning. Yeah, exactly. And I can tell you, I have the CGM here, and it's incredible. I could have literally cake, cheesecake, whatever dessert, and my blood sugar does not move. It's insane.
Did you take – so one thing, Dustin, brand manager, we're talking about dihydroberberine. The brand name is GlucoVantage. We haven't mentioned GlucoVantage yet.
Yes.
Do we sometimes get lost between the ingredient name and the trademark name or anything? Should I be saying GlucoVantage every time?
Well, GlucoVantage, yes. The thing is that it's patented by us. And so that patent is the reason why, we can talk about dihydroberberine. So you brought up the brand manager aspect. One of the campaigns that I'm working on to build demand for dihydroberberine was born after many conversations with, a partner agency. And the example that we used to create this campaign was basically about avocados. So this agency had worked with a company out of Mexico that sold avocados. and they wanted to build demand to sell more. But they didn't build demand for their brand. They built demand for avocados because they were already supplying more than 60% of the avocados in the United States. So the conclusion they came to after a lot of market research is, we don't necessarily need to build a ton of name for this brand. In the position that we're in, we just need more people to want avocados. And eventually when they're led to avocados, they will buy this brand. I will say that the importance of GlucoVantage with the patent is that now that we've grown a lot, there's a lot of copycats in the space. So the importance of attaching that name GlucoVantage and making sure that we still use it is that when we do launch this campaign, yes, we'll be building demand for Dihydroberberine, but in particular, we're going to be letting people know that if it's not GlucoVantage Dihydroberberine, it's not the real deal, right? So that's the importance of the name when it comes to a patented ingredient that you've secured the market on.
That's interesting.
It's funny because, so this is a conversation that Mike and I have had, because I'll sometimes in videos not say GlucoVantage. I'll say Dihydroberberine. It's just, it rolls off of my tongue faster when I think about what it is. I think one win to it though is that like berberine overall has really grown. So you can piggyback off of that a decent amount.
Exactly.
So, and it's also just me being in the industry knowing that if someone's getting Dihydroberberine that isn't GlucoVantage, then that's a problem. Like, you know, like I feel pretty confident saying that because I know that it has to come from you if they want quality.
We just worked on like going through all our sell sheets, all our branding, and we had the tagline, the super berberine. And we thought about, you know, there's a lot of other things we can say, but for the moment, berberine has a lot of cachet, has a lot of awareness, top of mind awareness. So for the moment, that's where we are. And saying dihydroberberine, I think sticks more than GlucoVantage, but you're right. I mean, that's definitely the brand, and that's where the quality is.
So Shawn, back to your CGM, constant glucose monitor.
Yeah.
Did you, after we ate barbecue, how are you doing over there?
Oh, I actually have to run it, but like I literally spend 99% of my time within range.
Right.
So I definitely don't have an issue. I was talking to you before about like my girlfriend seems to kind of go in and out of the range a lot more, even especially when she sleeps, which is a big concern. She goes low, and I have her using dihydroberberine now, and now she's staying, again, just like me, 99% within range. And this means I've noticed that with women in particular, they're more carbohydrate sensitive. Like keto fasting is more difficult for women, and it can like translate into more mood shifts, if you will. I don't want to like put that out there like I'm being judgmental, but it is a like physiological thing that like when your blood sugar is low or your blood sugar is high, but especially low, that you know it can have an impact on mood. And so what I've seen since she's been using dihydroberberine is like she's told me this repeatedly. She's just like, I feel like more even keel throughout the day. I feel more resilient. You know, she works a lot with me, and so she's working 8 to 10 hour days and, you know, crushing a lot of work. And she's like, I just feel more even. Like it just feels like easier. I don't feel like I'm overwhelmed as easy. And so that's been a great thing, like a kind of secondary effect of using a GDA. Yeah. And you don't want to say it, but I will. Guys, if you're with your woman and it's between, let's say 4, 5, 6 p.m. and she's starting to get a little snippy at you, there's a good chance she's hungry. You got to feed the girl. So like, that's just how it is. So it's kind of cool. You see that. Back in, it was like 2019 when I wore my CGM, and there was a moment where I was crashing. But I didn't know if I was A, tired, B, needing more caffeine, or C, having a blood sugar dump. But the CGM told me I was actually having a blood sugar dump. And I wouldn't have known. I would have actually, what I would have done in that situation would have been to caffeinate. Because totally. But one thing doing keto and a lot of CGM stuff, like I've learned, there's probably 2 things that you should do first is a little bit of carbs, potentially, also salt. Salt can make a huge difference on cognition, and like when you're feeling like you're bottoming out, especially if you do keto or you're doing fasting, just a little bit of salt, it's crazy, can turn the lights back on. So yeah, that's a great point. Before you reach for caffeine, that can help. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
I've actually had the same problem where I crash after meals, and I've been mostly caffeine free for the last couple of years. And I'm in the same situation now. You know, caffeine is masking so many people's problems. They're using it to cover up so many of the issues that they have. So now when I get tired, I assess, is it my blood sugar? Is it the salt? And I've actually found that dihydroberberine before meals, for me, it's more about preventing those crashes during the day. The funniest moment that not the funniest, but anecdotal moment that I had in terms of alternate uses of dihydroberberine, going back to like the bodybuilder crowd and the bodybuilder world. Good friend of mine, professional bodybuilder, after his show at the Arnold, hanging out with it was after the Tampa Pro, hanging out with like a bunch of his friends, trainers at the table. They were talking about big meals pre-workout, right? To fill their muscle glycogen, get ready for the workout. But then they were talking about, passing out on the car ride to the workout after the big meal. And for me, oddly enough, before the pre-workout meal, dihydroberberine has been huge in ensuring that the muscle glycogen goes to the right place, but also ensuring that I don't have an insulin crash before I work out, so that I can actually train at a high level without feeling tired before the workout. A lot of bodybuilders are using the carbohydrate drinks, intra-workout for continued energy, but these are huge guys. They have plenty of muscle glycogen stored. I know a lot of them are crashing during the workout, not realizing it, masking it with carbohydrate drinks or caffeine or things of the like. So I actually got like a whole table full of bodybuilders who are going to try dihydroberberine before their pre-workout meal. So it'll be pretty interesting.
What does mostly caffeine-free mean?
So mostly caffeine-free is I'll go months at a time without caffeine, but then like at a show or at an event or before like a big meeting when I'm low on like energy, I can do a can of soda and be wide awake. Wow. And so when I go that stretch of time without caffeine, my tolerance is very low. It takes me nothing to wake back up.
Are you allowed to be caffeine-free in this industry?
I've made it so far. So I'll tell you what.
We're missing the big question. Do you drink paraxanthine?
Yes, that is my weapon of choice. I actually had paraxanthine before this podcast since I had a big meal, didn't want to fall asleep during it. I had 100 milligrams. But to answer your question, during our last podcast, I think I mentioned to you guys when I was in the Betancourt era, I was working with DMAA and phenolthylamine. I was cutting phenolthylamines with hordenine to extend the half-life. I was all in it. And I'm glad that era is over. And so is my central nervous system.
That's true. Sure. One thing on the getting tired after eating, I have found that if that is a situation, sometimes we mentioned sodium. For me, if I'm crashing after food, it means a potassium issue might be at hand too. So I've been pushing the potassium side. It's so easy for me to get salt on my meat and everything. Yeah. So I guess I should take the measurements, but potassium is something that I appreciate. Maybe NNB will make a little something for me. Wait, actually, well, I'm not sure if you want to talk about it right now, but you do have ElectroPrime, which we didn't formally ever cover it on PricePlow. Part of it is because I couldn't ever figure out what exactly the formula was. And now you have some internal research at least coming out about it. So can you describe what is ElectroPrime? And then let's talk about that data real quick.
Yeah, it's electrolytes and glycerol. And, glycerol has great data with hyperhydration. You guys know that. We have our HydroPrime that essentially has been on the market for years and really came out again. We talk about case studies where NNB steps in because of a need. There was 2 other glycerols that were on the market. One tested very much short of its claim. The other one had massive issues with clumping. And so we stepped in, case study, solving the problem, where we hit the 65%, we don't have the clumping, and it's a great product that obviously tests out, and you can get that hyperhydration effect. Obviously, hydration is really hot right now, so we're adding the electrolytes to it, and we're also exploring adding taurine because there's data there on taurine too. So we're kind of tweaking this as the market demands, and but it's been fun to come out with this because there is a lot of demand around it.
How do you split your time between thinking about things like that, which are blends of conventionally available ingredients, versus dihydroberberine, like pioneering a whole new ingredient?
Most of my time is on the novel stuff for sure, and then exploring what the patent landscape is and if there's patentability there. I could give some of my inside tricks, but I think I'll skip that.
Nice. So with ElectroPrime, what happened in the study? You're talking about being an isotonic beverage. There's a whole lot of stuff that was honestly new to me and everything. And it was really interesting because you pitted it up against some pretty good sellers, and your ingredient alone beat complete finished products from what we were looking at the data.
Yeah, I mean, Dustin, you just did a good sell sheet on that, and you can speak to it well.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is ElectroPrime in and of itself is sort of like a finished product. But then the advantage for NNB is that because we provide pre-blends, really anybody can customize the electrolyte blend to their liking. But I mean, we had some high molecular weight stuff in there, calcium, magnesium, and, the whole goal here for this preclinical was driving osmotic pressure. So the claim to fame of one of the main competitors with their use of sugarcane was the ability to drive osmotic pressure and to drive water into the cells. And obviously we know carbohydrate, sugar especially, has the ability to do that. And so the big thing is with more people trying to look for lower sugar or carbohydrate-free solutions to electrolytes, the one thing that all these, sugar-free electrolyte alternatives aren't telling you is that they may not be driving hydration as well as their carbohydrate partners or competitors.
Quite often not even close, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, according to our preclinical, not even close. And so the opportunity here was, with ElectroPrime, we're showing that, of course, yes, some of our glycerol competitors had great, like performance data. There was already hydration data that was out there. But the importance of us showing how much more you can drive osmotic pressure into the cell with our study not only, proves out what those studies on glycerol showed, that, you can maintain hydration within the cell even during exercise, maintain performance during exercise. Shawn mentioned hyperhydration, but the other part of it too is the logistics, the business side that nobody thinks of, which is sort of like my world, where, if you have a ready to drink with glycerol, cool. But how are you going to transport it? How are you going to store it? How are you going to get it to the finish line to be used in a ready to drink? And then the other major thing is our industry is trending hard with packets when it comes to hydration. That's the biggest trend. That's where our big competitors are. That's where everybody's playing in now. And I can tell you right now that the tooling within a sample packet machine to fill these packets will turn glycerol to glue almost immediately. And so that's the other opportunity that we have is just the flowability aspect. I was speaking with a customer the other day. He was like, I use a contract manufacturer saying, I use your HydroPrime for like one of my customers. And I know that you guys can, you can change particle size and, granularity of ingredients. Is there anything you do with this HydroPrime? Because it's a little cloudy. When I put it in the machine, I feel like I'm getting like a 10% loss because the thing's dissipating in the air. Well, I'm like, we could, but here's the problem. Look at your retain samples for this. And he's like, my retain samples of over a year are still fine powder. I'm like, have you ever seen that before in any glycerol product? He's like, no, to be honest with you, I've had clients in the past, it ships out and 4 months later, the stuff is clumping and we're having like a return conversation. And I was like, well, that's the big difference. You're going to lose 10% because it's a little bit cloudy, or are you going to have your client have 100% satisfaction even 2 years after the ship date? So that's the other major factor is that, yes, it's one thing for us to deliver this great osmotic pressure in the finished study, but the difference between our glycerol and the competition is you can actually get it into a packet to be able to even attempt having that comparison.
Can I ask a question to bring things back for 1 second? Some people might be confused when you say that without the sugar, they're not getting the hydration factor. Because for a lot of people, like intaking electrolytes is hydration. Yeah. Could you explain the difference between just taking in electrolytes and not being hydrated?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they wouldn't get the hydration factor. So if I said no hydration, I misspoke. Obviously, there is a hydration component. We're talking about the levels of osmotic pressure, ability to drive water into the cell, and then ability to maintain hydration within the cell during physical activity. And all the research on glycerol, even independent from us, shows greater hydration with fluid loss over time. Right. So there's a big difference between using glycerol and simply changing your hydration status temporarily.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's really cool? A lot of studies with high heat in particular, like athletes performing under like extreme heat conditions, and we're in Texas, so like that's a reality. So exactly.
And what's also cool is that so sodium and glucose get shuttled together sometimes, and this might be slightly wrong, but the SGLT1 pathway. And so they come together. So the electrolyte solutions that have glucose perform better as an isotonic beverage for osmotic pressure. However, customers don't want to see added sugar on the line. Exactly. If you use ElectroPrime, you get it from glycerol, and you don't need to have as much added sugar on the nutrition facts panel.
100%.
It just clicked for me while we were talking about that.
And we can do a no sugar option as well.
And you still get the benefits thanks to the glycerol, not needing to add a bunch of dextrose, glucose, or whatever to add the added sugar.
Exactly.
Boom, cane sugar. See you later. Okay, that's all.
Yeah,
that's cool.
That's a great point, and that is a pathway I've been looking at very heavily. So that's a good one.
Nice.
Thank you.
Taking it a step back, we've gone into a couple ingredients. Can we back up a little bit? It's like for some of our newer listeners who aren't as familiar with NNB nutrition, and they just see you as a bunch of cool ingredients.
Yeah.
It's obviously you're growing and there's a lot of stuff happening. So can you Dustin, you were in China for at least 5 days or whatever. Can you
11 days actually.
You're 11 days. Okay. So can you give us the trip and then what did you learn and then just kind of go backwards at the whole story?
Yeah, so I had an idea, obviously, of how big NNB was before they had hired me. I was convinced when I realized that they were vertically integrated and they can really provide solutions outside of just the innovative, great, cool ingredients. So that's one thing that really sold me about joining the company. But then my trip to China was eye-opening, right? We were talking in sort of that video we were shooting earlier about people's view of China in the 1980s versus now. Mm-hmm. Just hearing from our head of R&D about what it takes to go through the fermentation process. I had a new level of respect for our R&D team when they were mentioning, okay, fermentation is not as easy as just flipping a switch and deciding to do it. You have to find the starting materials and microbes for this thing. And the fact that we've been able to do that for so many ingredients that come from botanicals, whereas our competition is not, to me, that was eye-opening, not just from our facilities, but from a talent level that we have. I'm being introduced to these people on the R&D team and, 6 years in school, master's degrees and, chemistry, biology, and all these things all in one room. And we're discussing R&D. The other big difference is, a lot of raw material companies, you can go to their office and hang out with their reps and, talk about the ingredients that they are distributing. When I was in China, they drove me 45 minutes to another town, to an entirely separate, huge R&D facility. We're walking through room after room after room. Obviously, we're dressed up, cap and gown, full CGMP. But just walking through all the different capabilities that they have, from testing to changing particle size to how they can do extraction to how they can do fermentation. I mean, all the things that distributors in this industry are relying on from a third party that remains unnamed by most of us, we are literally doing in separate buildings, and we're continuing to expand. So I knew that before I got there, but then actually seeing how much staff we had, actually seeing how much square footage we had dedicated to this whole process, and actually hearing how much artistry has to go into creating these ingredients, not just having the machines and flipping a switch. All of that to me was eye-opening.
We have state-of-the-art equipment that actually can convert pretty much any oil into a powder. That's really exciting. That's how we started down that path with our C Advantage, right. The caprylic acid MCT, and converting that to a powder, using, instead of maltodextrin or what have you, using pea protein and tapioca starch in a digestive resistant powder. So it's non-glycemic, and we can do that with pretty much any oil. And that's really exciting. So we're doing custom stuff for a number of companies. It could be, pumpkin seed oil, hemp oil, whatever. We can powderize it.
And you're doing a lot of that for other companies who are selling ingredients and not selling it yourself.
We do. So probably half of what we do is for other ingredient distributors.
How do you decide if something's going to be the NNB ingredient or let someone else?
We're hitting a point where it makes sense to, if we want our growth, to not keep everything in-house. We can only talk about so many ingredients. We can only specialize on so many ingredients. And there's other companies out there that have great teams that maybe have one or two ingredients, and they don't have anything at all that fits this category. And so they can speak about it, specialize on it, focus on it, have their salespeople dead set on that. And then that makes a lot of sense for us. So that's actually worked out really well.
That makes sense because when we cover NNB, a lot of it has been in the metabolic area: GlucoVantage, MitoBurn, calorie burn, Zinja burn. Like there's a lot of burning going on. So if you have an ingredient that's kind of like not within that profile, it might be better to let someone else speak on it. If you're so busy talking about some of these like just killer successful ingredients.
I didn't want to say it earlier, but one of the reasons I say like Beba and Dihydroberberine is because all the names are the same names, and I feel like I might confuse people more sometimes if I like. When I talk about one fat burner, you guys always have MitoBurn and CaloriBurn, and sometimes Zinja burn, and like to differentiate, sometimes I use the other names.
That makes sense. Yeah, awesome.
Well, when you say that though, are you talking about selling to another person or partnering with another company?
Partnering. So, we have the intellectual property, we have the manufacturing of the ingredient, and they are licensing from us. So, cool. Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Okay. What's going on with Rhodiola? Are we allowed to talk about this yet? Or is this...
By the time this comes out, it'll be...
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about it. I mean, these things are already in motion. The ingredient is already available. So yeah, it's definitely something we can talk about.
I guess start from the top. Okay. So this was HydroPrime and RhodioPrime 6X were two ideas that Ben and I pushed pretty hard for NNB to do and everything. And so the backstory is there's a lot of Rhodiola out there, same old stuff over and over and over. But we started thinking that like the more experiential versions were the ones with Salidroside, but you never saw them stay in the market. So wrote an email to Shawn and Kylan and said, we think that there's something here. And and selfishly, we just want some cool stuff in pre-workouts and everything. So
12 weeks later, we had it in our pockets.
Yes.
It was crazy.
Kylan moves. Shawn, you guys move fast. Yeah. And so there was 6% Salidroside, but it wasn't from Rhodiola rosea. It was from Crenulata. And so that's where we led. So this ingredient's been really cool in our space with if you want Salidroside, which I believe is the better constituent of Rhodiola
versus Rosavins. Yeah.
Yes, but now things are changing a bit. So that's your lead in.
Yeah. So Rhodiola has been on the CITES list for a few years, both Rosavins and Crenulata.
What's the CITES list?
So they target CITES. It's an acronym, sorry. And they target endangered species, especially in the world of botanicals. And when you end up on the endangered species list, if you go far enough down the road and they feel like there's enough of a risk, they will actually restrict international trade, and they'll regulate around the trade of that ingredient. And so you do have a couple of major players in the industry working with CITES who are able to continue with the distribution of Rhodiola because they're able to ensure that it's coming from sustainable sources. But you have a large portion of the industry who is not able to distribute through that pathway. And my concern is that whenever there's major restrictions or there's too much popularity and not enough supply of a botanical ingredient, what happens? You got 20, 30 products that pop up on Amazon that don't test out, right? And so that's my concern with Rhodiola is, okay, on the business end, you have the issue of your ingredient not testing out, you wasting your money on fairy dust. And then on the sustainability being a good neighbor end, okay, there's a lack of availability of this ingredient. We have technology now where we can target the bioactives of products. You know, it's time to take one step farther into the future with Rhodiola.
Okay. And what are you doing?
So that sets the stage for Salidroside being a pure product. So it is, we call it SalidroPure, and it is truly, it's fermented and there is no other ingredient in there besides Salidroside. So now, you know, when you compare to like the old Rhodiola rosea that was 3% Rosavins, 1% Salidroside, this is literally 99 to 100 times the strength. And so what that means is, one, you're getting rid of all the herbal components that have organoleptic challenges, right? You're getting rid of the massive doses that have challenges certainly fitting, you know, a full formulation in a capsule, right? Or in a gummy, or, you know, what have you, something along those lines, a gum maybe. And so now everything is possible when our dose is 20 to 30 milligrams of SalidroPure and it's experiential. So like people have never felt Rhodiola like this, first off. Secondly, to be 20 to 30 milligrams, like I'm saying, you can put it in the gummy, in the gum, in the shot, in the RTD with no issues in terms of taste or mass.
And 20 milligrams is a pretty big dosage for it too.
That's a huge dose.
Yeah.
And like 30 is like really big. And it's that's what I'm saying. Like, I love it because it's very experiential at that point. 2,000
milligrams of Rhodiola rosea is what that's equivalent to when you think about 1% Salidroside versus pure.
Should have put that in the energy drink.
So
is there time?
I want to get to that real quick, but how is this even happening? So it's not an extract. You are not touching a Rhodiola plant for this?
Fermentation.
And so you start with some other chemical and you have...
It's bacterial fermentation. So it is vegan friendly. It is clean. There is no byproducts to this, like chemical byproducts with solvents and things like that, residues that would be left over normally. So this is clean for the environment, one, where we make it, but it's also a cleaner, purer product. As you know, even creatine, which is currently synthetic, there are chemical residues, solvents that are potentially left behind. Whereas like if something is fermented, there's none of that. So it is going to be the cleanest version of an ingredient. And so we're excited that yes, it's vegan friendly, it's super clean, and it's ultra concentrated.
Right. And when we talk about creatine, like a lot of passing lab tests are 95, 96%.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with 5 grams of actual material, like 4 to 5% of other stuff is actually a fair number of milligrams of other stuff. So that's where it really does start mattering that it is that pure. It's definitely cool that you are able to get exactly what we were originally asking for in the first place. I got to give you props for that. I do also, though, like the sustainability stuff, like when people are planting new crops and everything, that's obviously like good too.
I'm excited by it. I'm a big fan of Salidroside. So just in general, I'm excited by the opportunity to get 2,000 milligrams worth of a dosage for fun, right? The sustainability is great. I kind of want to also pair it with Rhodiola. But think about it, because there are naturally occurring things in there that obviously like bounce off of each other. I want to know what happens if we jack up the Salidroside dosage, taking some normal Rhodiola.
I can tell you, there's definitely not that necessarily, because again, that is really an endangered species, and I get the thought process there. But I can tell you that there's already 2.0 and 3.0 in the works with some combinations that we're looking at. Yep.
Nice. So we were talking about the energy drink. It's already been announced by the time this is published. So
hopefully this went up October 9th, and on the 3rd it was announced. But we have this really cool energy drink occurring at SupplySide. And I've got a great Shawn Wells story to tell about this. So we were talking with Shawn because Infinity is in here, and you're involved with Infinity, but it was kind of an NNB call. And so like kind of what we were talking about before, there's sometimes a little bit of like same people, different teams and whatever. And so we're talking about this energy drink and we're like moving, and this has already been finished and it's like sent off to manufacturing, and we're trying to just like keep the conversation moving. And Shawn just goes, "Is this formula finished?" And like, I knew what that meant. And I was like, kind of. And so Joey and I kind of put this formula together. And so
I could hit formula.
Thank you. I mean, features some stuff that you definitely love. But when you said that, I could tell Shawn, Joey and I were like, what's he gonna recommend? And it was really funny because you literally go, there's an experiential dosage of MitoPrime Ergothioneine, 25 milligrams will cover it.
And Joey and I were like, oh,
so
neither of us had thought of that. I thought you were going to say SalidroPure, and I wasn't sure if that was proven to be beverage stable. But when you mentioned MitoPrime, I was like, it just hit me like a bag of bricks.
The kick of the joke is, or not joke, but story is that Joey goes, if it was anyone else or any other ingredient, I'd disagree. But like it was like, it's Shawn Wells. You got to listen to Shawn. And he gives us like this one really cool ingredient to add in. It's not an energy drink ingredient typically
not, but this is what's exciting about it. So MitoPrime, I mean, first off, it's fermented. It is L-Ergothioneine. It's not like a mixed isomer. There are other companies that have put it out on the market that are mixed isomer or are extracting it from mushrooms, and it's a 5% extract. This is the only pure fermented L-Ergothioneine on the market. And so one, that's exciting. And we've been doing like 5 to 10 milligrams a day Maybe some people have done upwards of 20 a day, but we're finding that there is an experiential effect at 25 to 50 milligrams. The problem is the cost has been sky high. And when I say high, like, I mean, you know, when we first started working on this, it was $12,000 a kilo. We've had price breaks as we've continued to work on it, continue to scale up and have this ingredient be more popular. We just had another one. And that led us to say, well, what does higher doses do? Because now we can potentially do this where, you know, this one isn't just like a minor price break. This is literally cutting the price in about 20%. So we've been exploring the 25 to 50, and it is experiential. Plus, we are looking at this ingredient being a new vitamin. You've heard it, you know, be called the longevity vitamin by Dr. Bruce Ames. Who, like Rhonda Patrick, you know, spun out of his lab. He did all the work on like alpha lipoic acid and acetyl L-carnitine and those ingredients for anti-aging, specifically around like mitochondrial function. And this is a mitochondrial ingredient. And what we do see is, yes, it's a great antioxidant. You helped me work on the messaging on this years ago.
This was one of my favorite rabbit holes ever, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the history part of it, right? Like, like the prehistoric story, like that blows my mind.
Well, what's cool, like what we're finding out now, when you look at it, there's not been many human studies, certainly with this higher dose. But what we are seeing with the human studies is that when you look at ergothioneine levels endogenously, meaning in the body, with certainly people as they age, and ergothioneine levels are naturally declining, and you can see a straight line correlation to like literally longevity and ergothioneine. It's insane, like direct. And so what we also see is that as someone's aging and they're deficient, it shows up cognitively first. And so obviously what's going to use the most energy in the body? What are the most energy dependent organs? It's going to be the brain and the heart, right? So that's where you would expect to see the biggest difference, and we do. And what's crazy about ergothioneine is, you know this too, Mike, that there's a unique transporter for it, the ETT, or it's also called OCT1, and there's a unique storage system for it. If you're an evolution person or just basic science person, you know that means, holy crap, this ingredient must be very important. There's pretty much no other nutrient in your body that's like that we are evolved to have a unique transporter for this nutrient. So we're just really excited. There's studies coming out on a weekly basis on this nutrient. People are seeing like this could be not just like the next cool supplement, but literally the new vitamin and critical to anti-aging. And, you know, I've said it for years that like Mito is the next keto. Like Mito is everything. Like mitochondrial health determines your metabolic health, determines your biological age versus your chronological age. So this is really exciting. That's why, you know, I love Salidroside. Yes, that would have made sense in here. But because we're looking at this price break, because we're like leading the way on ergothioneine, because we're looking to do these higher dose studies, I just wanted to throw it in here and kind of prime the market, so to speak. So it was just really exciting to me that we kind of own this part of the market. And I think it's going to be a huge breakthrough where people actually feel it. I can tell you, like I have around heavy drinking and like little sleep and, you know, a lot of these like kind of trips to China or Vegas or whatever, when I'm like kind of upside down and, you know, really tired, this has been a game changer.
Can you explain the experience to us? Is like, what do you feel?
Truly cognitive clarity, in energetic resilience. And so, yes, Salidroside would make a lot of sense with it. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
So
or paraxanthine.
100%. Totally. Absolutely. One of my most favorite ingredients ever, as you know.
Yeah.
Like paraxanthine is a daily prerequisite for me. I am a zero caffeine person and I love paraxanthine.
Now, on the topic of L-ergothioneine sold as MitoPrime, one of the things, some of the things I loved, not only is it, we have our own transporter for it. We can't make it ourselves.
Yep.
Yet it chemically can be made organically and inorganically. It's like this crazy compound that has been shown to outperform glutathione. So I started looking at this, damn, like there's all these things coming together, and you see that it can be found in mushrooms, like, and so what Ben was talking about,
organ meats and certain beans,
right? Yeah,
and the king trumpet, I believe, is the highest mushroom.
I think you're right. Yeah. And so what's really cool is that some of the, obviously we weren't there with a camera and lab equipment, but it's theorized that this chemical helped life survive the great oxygenation event 2.4 billion
to aerobic.
Yes, 2.4 billion years ago is what they hypothesized, and a lot of research keeps pointing back to like this is where this molecule started coming around and protecting against like harmful oxidation.
It is the compound that may have been critical to the spark of life.
It's crazy.
That's what you're saying. And yes, that is what we're actually seeing, especially for people that are more on the evolution side of the spectrum. Like that may have been the the big bang, if you will, for life is ergothioneine. Like literally that was like the catalyst or the ember.
I don't know if I'll take it that far, but I'm not going to argue. Like that would be a super cool story. Either way, the data looks really exciting. The problem is, you're selling 5 to 10 milligram doses. And I think this might be something that NNB is going to need to overcome with some ingredients in terms of immunity. Like if you want to sell it into an immune system supplement or something, I don't have any data showing that this reduces the average cold by half a day or anything like that with MitoPrime. And that's like, so it's like we're going by a really cool historical story. We're going by some really cool mechanistic data, all the stuff, transporters and everything. But at the end of the day, brands want to be able to make a claim like this is, some kind of claim, this is better for immunity. I don't know if they could say this is better for the common cold, but you know what I'm saying. And so that's where an ingredient like ergothioneine, you're almost too ahead of the curve. Yeah, and it's up to Dustin to like, how do we get this back
100%.
So what do you do?
So we are teeing up the potential future for this ingredient with our in-house preclinicals. So another great thing about NNB is the fact that we can do the preclinical studies in-house to sort of figure out, okay, what direction can we take this ingredient in? And one of the things that we're seeing, especially when it comes to our ingredients, is just how much we're starting to relate to the biohacking community by making these premium, sometimes high price point ingredients. And so when you look at MitoPrime, one trend that it fits really well into right now, even if we're just talking about mechanism of action, is, okay, anti-aging was a term that's sort of becoming outdated. Longevity sort of becoming outdated. Now the trend is people are saying things like health span. You have other claims out there in regards to just this idea of feeling and looking younger no matter what age you're at. And when it comes to things like that, there aren't necessarily any ingredients out there that just literally say de-aging. A lot of it is based on mechanism of action when you're talking about that category of customer. So if the question is okay, like what do we do with MitoPrime right now where we have all these theoretical nice things we can say about it in terms of longevity, but all we have that's practical is mechanism of action? Well, the community that is acting on mechanism of action is that I want to look and feel younger community. It is that biohacking community. And for the future, we are teeing up what some of those potential concrete claims are, because we have entire dossiers, and we'll have this on our sales sheet at SupplySide West, where the last page of the sales sheet is, all the directions that MitoPrime could go in the future based on preclinicals. And then the beginning of our sales sheet is, okay, these are all the hard-hitting clinical human studies we have right now in terms of what MitoPrime can do. For example, we do have human clinicals on UV protection, right? So MitoPrime's use in protecting you from UV light in the sun, protecting your skin from degradation. That speaks to that whole beauty, anti-aging, looking and feeling younger community right now. The cellular health, the neuroprotection, all of these things that we have human clinicals for that speak to that community that is trying to feel and look younger for longer right now. And so that's sort of the direction that we can go in with it right now. And then the preclinicals that you'll see on the sales sheet point to the direction we can go in with it in the future if we want to take any of those to the human clinical stage.
But I can tell you, like a couple of the things that were limiting before is the cost of it. And we have now pioneered the breakthrough on the fermentation to bring the cost to a point where it's really a game changer. And before, the issue could have been that because of bioindividuality and like how much, like one, how active maybe that transporter is, two, how much you've been having in your diet, three, how much is stored, and then four, how much you're depleting of it. Let's say you have autoimmunity or, you know, what have you. I don't know, right? Like you could be overworking your mitochondria. Maybe you're exposed to mold or whatever. Like a lot of people have a lot of different issues where they're tapping into mitochondrial function excessively. And so now I don't have to worry about priming it for, you know, a month or 2 months or like what that looks like. So everyone's even. And with these larger doses, it's experiential acutely. So I know like I'm moving the needle acutely. So now that opens up the door for a lot of different research. That's a much narrower window, and we can go higher dose because of the cost breakthroughs. So this is the game changer for us to now do research.
Are you looking for claims on that acute effect, that mental clarity?
100%. Yeah.
You mentioned biological age earlier.
Yeah.
Is that metric ever something that you foresee being able to make claims on? It's like a proprietary scale, right?
You know, there are different. Yeah. If we worked with like GlycanAge or some of these companies, everyone's got a different way of calculating it. Telomerase and, you know, all like different ways to look at it. Maybe hemoglobin A1C and lipoprotein A and you know, CRP and all these different things that you could look at. But we could work. I have thought about that, working with someone like GlycanAge, which is become pretty popular. That's one that I've used. And I'm actually aging. I just looked at it the other day, and I was aging at 72%, which is really awesome. Like the best I've ever seen, like the Brian Johnson is like around 60% or 62%. So basically I'm aging at 3/4-ish the rate of an average person. And of course, some people are like pro aging, right? Like where they're smoking, they're drinking, like they're aging at 1.2 or, you know, something along those lines. So I do think that is a fascinating potential metric and could be a partnership that we could look into. But I am waiting for these things to be a little bit more validated. And there's kind of a lot of different players right now. So maybe.
It's an interesting space. I don't fully buy it.
It's very proprietary is the problem.
Right.
Right. But you're talking about like, how do you find a metric that matters to those biohackers? I mean, like that would matter to a lot of people, and the people it wouldn't matter to would be willing to talk about it, I bet.
So well, just HRV alone is an easy metric that almost everyone that's a biohacker has on them. And there's a lot of these companies, like I work with a company called Reputable. I'm a founding member in, and like they can literally just grab data from any biohacker that does have a Ring or a Garmin or a Whoop strap or Ultrahuman or any of these devices, and then that's data, you know. So it's not going to be at the same level as a, you know, double-blind placebo-controlled, you know, study, but there is a lot of great data potentially on that level with HRV. I do love that metric.
I know Whoop has been donating units to schools to use for studies. Yeah. I don't necessarily love HRV universally, but I think that trends on your own are really
agreed. No, you know? Yeah, agreed with that.
Like some people try to match numbers. I know Whoop like has a community aspect where it's like my HRV versus his. I think it's individual.
Totally agree with that. Yeah.
And Dustin, this is why you spend so much time on Reddit. That's kind of where the community for a lot of that is.
Yeah, well, I mean, you just want to stay up to date with, you know, we always have our perspective in the industry with what we're saying, what we're talking about. But if you can't meet the customer with where we're at, sometimes there are trends that we start because we got excited over research or we got excited over this metric. But if you don't look at what people are actually talking about, what people are actually doing, what people are actually pursuing, there can be a disconnect and a gap that you'll never be able to cover.
Yeah,
that's a great point. And there's so many ingredients that there's probably more than 100 right now that we're going back to now review that I've put in front of Kylan that we've worked on and are not out on the market. One of the biggest metrics or KPIs for us lately has been experiential. Experiential. If people feel it, they'll buy it. There's so many ingredients that I may love, like, I don't know, ubiquinol, cool. Like that's like one that Shawn might like, or PQQ, you know, like cool. Those are cool. Like I love mitochondrial health, obviously. But do you feel it? No. And like, how many people have like a bottle of it that's half used, that's in their, you know, pantry or in their, you know, whatever.
The graveyard.
The graveyard. But like paraxanthine, that was one of the, you know, the big things is like, you feel it. Okay. So like, obviously, you know, I worked on T-crene and dynamine and all these other ingredients. Like now with ergothioneine, that's why it's pushed ahead. Or can you at least prove it? Like with the dihydroberberine and, you know, a CGM or a glucometer, right? Like if you can prove it, if you can feel it, like those are the ones where we're really focusing now. And that's what pushes ahead of the pack.
Mm-hmm. So we've beaten around paraxanthine a couple times. So this is more of a Shawn Wells ING2 thing because TSI Group is distributing it. And at first I was like, why isn't NNB doing it? But then you're seeing how well TSI Group is with this ingredient. It's like phenomenal, the materials that they make and everything. So I'm a huge fan of that team, obviously.
They're a company that at the time I believe was ahead of us in certain ways, certainly with their American presence, but also like a global presence to go in regulatorily into other markets that we're not really a player in, like places like Brazil, EU, you know, like some of these places. And it made a lot of sense because it goes again back to, yes, they have ingredients that are great ingredients, legacy ingredients that you know very well, PKTP, certainly HMB. But beyond that, like they didn't have many things to speak of, right? They have this glucosagrine and the hobamine. But really, they didn't have an experiential ingredient. They didn't have an energy ingredient, a nootropic ingredient. So, you know, going back to what I was talking about before, where it makes sense for NNB to work with a company that has the authority, that has the presence, that has the salespeople, that has the trust, and they don't have something that fits in that space. If we give them that ingredient and it's one of their top 3 ingredients, well, now they're going to just turn and burn.
Right.
And so that's been the case. Like, and they've spent some, maybe you're not seeing quite the work that they're doing behind the scenes, but it's setting it up for a massive 2025.
Nice.
Like the regulatory work that's been done is considerable, like very considerable. And so it's going to leap forward in a massive way. And you're going to see it in a lot of beverages.
So they're actually doing some of the regulatory work.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like they're locked in on this.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. We look at it from such an American point of view, but you forget like there's this whole other world and they have their own laws and everything. And you're great at creating ingredients.
Yeah.
And getting so that's awesome that they're
and that's
taking
where
it that
I'm
far.
now like trying to focus more. Like Dustin said, I'm a creative. Like coming to terms with that. It's just like you guys know with a lot of companies, and I've helped build companies and watch CEOs do this. Like the CEO to build a company is not the CEO to maintain and scale the company long term, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Same with me. Like this is why I need a Dustin. I'm a creative and I'm not great at that kind of like day-to-day execution. I like coming up with the ideas, and it makes sense to like hand some of these great ideas off and let people run with them that are really good at that. And TSI is really good. Their reputation is gold standard.
Right. And with the XPO energy drink, that's where I thought NNB would be very proud because before we adding MitoPrime, because NNB manufactures 2 of the ingredients. I can say this, right? Paraxanthine, Infinity Paraxanthine is manufactured by NNB, as well as the Go BHB free acid ketones. So I'm like, all right, NNB should be all in because they're making 2, but it wasn't their own branded ingredients. So that's where MitoPrime gets added in as well.
I was just like, you know, it'd be cool to have like one that's truly NNB in the mix, but
plus, you sweeten the deal with like a new experience that like you probably can only find at SupplySide for right now.
I think this would be like a $20 energy drink.
This is for sure. Yeah, this is
for sure.
And that was
this is amazing.
Well, there was an email.
Like the second, like not only did I say, you have to understand almost all the ingredients I've made are like truly selfish because I just want these things for myself. And like when I was looking at this drink, I also was thinking, well, I want this drink to drink every day. And you know what would make it really cool? Is ergothioneine at a super high dose. So
that's what's funny is there's an email between Joey had overformulated what I believe to be overformulated some of this because I selfishly wanted to drink multiple per day. And the original formula had like such high doses. I'm like, Joey, I'm not gonna be able to drink 3 of these in one day.
Dude, but just Zembrin alone, I can tell you because I've formulated with it several times, is expensive. Man, like all these ingredients are awesome.
And it was almost like, we want it to be realistic to a degree. And then we end up making it kind of unrealistic with it, these large doses.
The perfect energy drink, though. I don't drink caffeine anymore, and I'll take it.
And you want to try one, we'll have a pallet at the NNB booth. And so we'll be excited to let you guys try it.
The really funny thing about all this was like originally we were like, we're just going to put together this cool product. And then, so like I had like a simple thing and Joey had already been kind of beta testing a version of this with the ketones. And then, so we started talking to brands and the ketone company, they're like, put as much as you want.
Never say that to Joey.
We were originally going to put 3 grams in and we put 10 at one point, and that was when Mike was like, pump the brakes. Like we're not that 10 grams of that's bad for anyone, but you want to drink 2 to 3 of them a day. So,
and then everything's in line with like basically a lot of these ingredients have 2 studied doses, or like for paraxanthine, it's in one shot you allow for 300 milligrams, or TSI allows for 300 milligrams, but basically 400 milligrams per day. Here we have 200 milligrams. Zembrin has dose studies at 25 and 50. So we went with we went with 25. Cognizant has studies at 250 and 500. We went with 250. And then, we're just going all in with MitoPrime, I guess. But, and then the ketones, I think 5 grams in one shot allows you to drink 2. But
the 25 milligram will become, I believe, the standard in 2025. So we're going to have probably 2 doses that we'll be exploring now. Is the 25 and the 50.
So that works out.
So that works perfect.
That's why I said this dose. Yeah.
These are also full 16-ounce carbonated cans. So like you can't just you could slam one of these, but you'd be burping.
It won't be quick.
Yeah. So like I think it'll spread people out, although hopefully they come back to the booth for a second and third one.
Hell yeah.
Because you'll have a whole full pallet to give away.
Hell yeah.
Otherwise you can send them back to my house.
Otherwise I'll be drinking them all year long. That's fine with me.
We're very excited. Anything else going on for SupplySide West as we get...
Yeah, a couple things. A big one is we just finished a study with Dr. Chad Kirksick on Alpha-GPC. So what's cool about the Genius Pure on that one is that we showed, this is the first time an Alpha-GPC has shown this, is that we showed an acute effect on memory, on with recall, as well as the
Stroop test.
The Stroop test, nice. But what was kind of like speed at which you could perform. I'm trying to think of the term. I'm blanking on it.
The speed at performing tasks?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a better term for that, but I'm not thinking of it right now. But I needed more Alpha-GPC apparently. But it's really exciting for us. So it validates the ingredient. We needed that study, and again, we'll be the only ones to be able to make an acute claim on that front. So that's
on the Alpha-GPC front.
Yep,
correct.
And so, what was it like Genius Pure 90%? Like, what was the dose?
Yep,
90% Genius Pure. Yeah.
How much?
It was 350 milligrams, but we also did a higher dose, just proof of concept in terms of like toxicity safety. We did 700 milligrams. Now, some people will say, "Oh, well, I've seen 1,000 and 1,200." Well, that was done at 50%. We're talking about 700 at 90%. So we have the highest dose used in a clinical, and then of course we have the 90% at 350 milligrams.
So which would be 300 active. Yeah.
So at 700, 90%, no adverse reactions.
Correct.
Wow.
But 350 is probably what's going to be sold because that's what the study's going to have. Yeah. And so in one shot, you're going to be able to have improved speed memory.
And
like
that 90%, we don't have the hygroscopic issues like the 50%. We don't have soy. So we feel, very confident that, and you guys have seen the demonstration of the hygroscopic. It's really anti-hygroscopic, like dramatically different than the 50%. So we're pretty excited about that. And then when you look at costs, it's about 30% cheaper at the effective dose, no matter what your concentration is you're looking at, than the competitors.
That's awesome.
That test is so funny because, like, you see pictures of it. Anyone could do that in a lab and take a picture at the right time. And then you do it in front of me at SupplySide, and it is phenomenal.
It's night and day.
And then we send one to Cody in Boise, who has not been instructed in any way to do anything special, and he's able to replicate it. It's like, I mean, it's not a clinical study, but
yeah,
it was pretty compelling.
Yeah.
So, anyone making a pre-workout like would want to take note, because you see this stuff turn into goop or whatever. That's going on in your pre-workout tub down here in humid Houston, or all these companies in Florida and everything. Like, can't have that.
So last one that we have data coming out on is Beba and Beba with Grains of Paradise. And that one should be exciting. So we're looking to see some, fat burning potential there that we're excited about, but we're waiting on that data. We should have that data along with the dihydroberberine data just prior to SupplySide West. So literally in the next 2 weeks or so, we're planning on landing all this data. So we're going to come in hard and heavy with all this new data.
Is that to be published with like humans? Like Chad's office publishes a lot of research.
Yeah, exactly.
But sometimes like the ElectroPrime study we talked about way earlier, that was internal.
No, this will be in a journal. Yeah.
This is okay. So you have a lot of, that's kind of cool. So
ready to write, Mike.
What? Yeah, seriously.
You got a lot coming your way.
Yeah. And so we're also, like I said, looking at the combination in one arm of the Grains of Paradise, our Caloriburn, and the Beba together. Mm-hmm. So we'll have an arm with just the Beba, but we'll be looking at them together too, which could be really interesting. We're expecting to see some synergy. So we'll see, what that data is. I'm really pumped about that one.
Can you talk about the synergy you're expecting a little bit?
I mean, one thing I'll tell you that's kind of crazy, just at Grains of Paradise alone, we looked at 160 milligrams. We did what I would say like an internal alpha level study. So this isn't going to be like great p-value because it was like 3 people.
It was 3 people, yeah.
But you do know this data, right?
Yeah, we wrote.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's right. You do know the data. So like just talking about it here, like 160 milligrams, I mean, we were seeing like over 200 calories burned in a 1 hour session of exercise above and beyond the exercise. So, I mean, that's like over an hour on the treadmill. Mm-hmm. Like that's an insane effect. And yes, again, like take that with a grain of salt, but we do believe that, going back to like the through line on NNB being 1, experiential, but 2, like really being enhanced potency, being smaller doses is like where we like to focus, and isolating compounds, like higher percentage extracts, all the things we like to do. When you think about a thermogenic, there is nothing milligram for milligram more potent than Grains of Paradise, what we're seeing. And so we're already seeing like even at that 40 milligram level, we see around 100 calories burned. And so I think adding that to Beba, both of these work on brown adipose tissue, which is really exciting. So that is, been like the holy grail of fat loss, if you will. I was doing air quotes there because that's, how it's been described in big pharma. Like, they've been looking at activating brown adipose tissue, increasing the activity of brown adipose tissue cells, the adipocytes, as well as beiging white adipose tissue. So those are like all 3 areas in this that they're looking at. And so we're excited again, kind of like the GLP-1 thing, to like, make a run at the most potent areas that are happening outside of nutraceuticals, I'll say.
Well, yeah, I hope that study comes out well, because we could do a small I told you so, because we have this wet to bat article, white adipose tissue to bat. And we talk about the synergy of those two, just like you were talking about. So I was, wet to bat. You Google that. And then, but yeah, then we'll have to update that as well. So you could see, that's what happens. October is very stressful for a lot of people in this industry, because everyone's like, we got to have, and we like to have like the fun podcasts going into SupplySide West to get everyone like fired up before and everything. But there's always some sort of drama. There's always like someone launches a lab test or something, and like, because you want to go into SupplySide West with some talk of the town. And it's like, there's going to be a lot of it between this energy drink, the studies, some of the lab tests that may or may not get released.
I was going to joke that typically we're just the guys with the cameras that show up and make some content. But this year we decided to pull our own hair out and do something.
Oh, things are changing.
About 5 days later, there'll be an election too. So.
Nope. Didn't even think of that.
Home safety.
It's an interesting couple of weeks. Yeah.
Trying to ignore that. And just
we have too much going on to really to be bothered by it.
One
to be
thing
honest,
that's kind of frustrating this year, because I am, a bonus dad, a girl dad right now to my daughter, I'll say, for Isla. And she's turning 7 October 10th. And I am wanting to be there for Halloween. Mm-hmm. And I know this is frustrating for everyone who has children in their lives. Also people like, adults now. It's like a big party thing too. But Halloween is like that last day of SupplySide West, and that's a little frustrating.
It's controversial.
Yeah, well,
a lot of complaints.
My daughter is nearly the same age and everything, and I'm leaving early. So we're not even huge Halloween people or anything. It's kind of a weird holiday if you take a step back and look at it. But at the same time, I am not the type of person who wants to miss that because you don't get 7-year-old Halloween many times in your life and everything. Yeah. So I am leaving early. But I get like the people who don't have kids or kids are older or whatever, I'm guessing like Halloween will be incredible in Vegas at SupplySide West. And then everyone else is like, I either need to leave or I'm going to be, missing my kids.
I really hope they never do that again.
I agree. But I get the allure.
But if you are stuck in Vegas on Halloween, there is a party called What's Up with Sups. You could come hang with us in a costume or not.
Okay, I'll be there.
Yeah, a little shout out
to be there, but okay, yeah,
yeah. There's a lot of parents that are not happy with Informa putting it on Halloween this year, but it's our Super Bowl.
It's our Super Bowl.
We gotta go.
It's literally like if it was any other thing, I would definitely not stay for that. But it is our Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
So
gotcha. Yeah.
Well, we got to pick out our costumes, I suppose, then.
I'm going as an NNB employee.
What are you going to be?
The theme is celebrities or something. TK and Joey wanted to go as like cowboys. I was kind of thinking like a John Wayne to fit in with the celebrities.
And then you just got to put on the cowboy hat and you don't have to
wear a little bolo tie.
Wear too much extra stuff. Yeah.
I despise wearing costumes. We've gone to What's Ups a few times and you've seen me. I don't wear any of I don't do that. I help Diana, promote it and everything, but I hate costumes, man.
Yeah, but I agree. But I realized this in college, we're way off track here now, but if you can't beat them, join them. And so I was so annoyed one year because everyone was so drunk and stupid and everything. And so the next year I went as Duff Man. And I went all out. Okay. It was the craziest Halloween ever. And like people are screaming across the street and everything to us. And so sometimes if you can't beat them, you do have to join them.
Fair.
But the What's Up with Sups parties are fun. In Vegas, I'm not sure if it's the same location, but if it gets a little too loud in there, you could always join the guys at the craps table nearby where
Mike
DiMaggio and Tyrus of SalidroPure. We had some. Everyone left pretty happy.
You go to the What's Up with Pumps. We typically go to the gym workouts.
And these XPO energy drinks should be in the
Can I tell you about what I feel like is my most brilliant costume ever? I was going to school. I was getting my master's at Chapel Hill doing nutrition biochemistry. I had a lab coat because I was working clinically often. And also at the hospital that I was working at, I got an IV bag, filled it up with vodka, walked around with my IV bag as the doctor. And, I had like the tap on it so I could just put the vodka in anything wherever I was going. Never had to spend a dime that night. If we were out on the streets, like walking the streets, I still had my drink going.
That's awesome.
Cool. So Ben, moral of the story, find something that plays into your personality. Yeah. Have fun with it. Or just troll everybody else.
Yeah.
Nowadays we'd be adding MitoPrime and all these ingredients to the IV.
Yeah. I rarely drink these days, so definitely in a different place. But I'm more into the psychedelic world now. But that's a whole other podcast. So
we got to do that one sometime.
I would love to do that. That's actually what I speak on most often now on stage. So it's the science of psychedelics. And I also talk on pre, peri, post supplement stacks. What to do around microdosing, et cetera, like what you might use with ketamine versus psilocybin versus like ayahuasca. Like there's a lot of neurotransmitter repletion that I'm focused on, as well as trying to stay in a neuroplastic state like post journey or ceremony or whatever word you want to use to allow for like greater integration, because really like there's two aspects that are critical to the psychedelic experience, and that's like the suppression of the ego, or turning off default mode network, however you want to refer to that, but also the enhanced neuroplasticity. And so both of those things, like the suppression of the ego allows you to like turn off constructs. Like, so the things that you've learned along the way that you believe to be true, but aren't necessarily true. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that. We're lying to ourselves a lot. Mm-hmm. And then the other part is the neuroplasticity, where a lot of us, like, especially if you're depressed, like I was, I used to have suicidal thoughts, depression pretty severely, and I would stay in loops. And depressed people have very low neuroplasticity, very low BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And so enhancing BDNF and trying to suppress ego longer post journey will allow for you to integrate more and make those changes needed, right? As well as I'm trying to replete neurotransmitters so that you're not as depleted post journey. So those are things like I've worked on. And I'm a big fan going back to like Salidroside and things like that, adaptogens and just that whole allostatic capacity, your stress bucket, because a lot of people just going into a journey are, overstressed about the potentially like maybe there's a lot of stress in their life anyway, and that's why they want to do a journey. But two, they might be stressed about the journey itself if they're new to it. Like, what are they going to see? Who's going to see me? Like, what if this comes up? Like, there's a lot. I have seen people like have meltdowns when like they say like the journey happens like when you commit to it, and stuff will start coming up like from unconscious to subconscious to conscious mind in that process. So like literally in the weeks leading up to a journey, there's stuff already bubbling up, and you're already primed when you get to the journey. You're already going through it. So I like to get people more into a parasympathetic state, because when they're in sympathetic, it takes a lot more of the substances to overpower you, to get you back into parasympathetic if you're ultra sympathetic. Meaning your nervous system state, like fight or flight or freeze is sympathetic, and rest and digest is parasympathetic. So like when I first started doing journeys, it took like 5.5 grams of mushrooms for me to like experience that. Whereas like once I got very experienced and I got more easily into kind of dropping into parasympathetic pre-journey, doing breath work, doing meditation, etc., I was having like a journey on 1 gram. And now obviously endogenously, that's going to take less of a toll on you physiologically. So whatever kind of that minimum dose is I can get to, minimum effective dose, like that would be more ideal. So if I can get someone more into parasympathetic, then I'm going to be able to use a lower dose but still have the efficacy. And they're going to be able to bounce back quicker.
Awesome. So if we have time, can we get your pre and post psilocybin stack or something? Or what do you want to ask?
You are NNB even when you're not being NNB, because you're talking about getting more out of less. That's like the dihydropsilocybin. Like, basically. you're like the whole time you're talking about like this whole the whole time it's been getting more out of less. But yeah, I'm
trying to come up with a less hygroscopic psilocybin. Just kidding.
So Paul Stamets has a stack alongside microdosing, but I always felt like it was kind of underdosed. Yeah, I was gonna say he had like real low doses of a couple things.
And yes, I feel like I crushed that stack, but also like hats off and like full acknowledgement to him for like leading the way, educating. He is the man among men when it comes to mushroom knowledge, and not just on psilocybin, but all functional mushrooms. Like, so trust me, I'm not like downplaying him at all. He is like the god of mushrooms. But
You just happen to know a lot about dietary supplements.
Exactly. I just always feel like these people who are knowledgeable in those fields, like same thing about like Huberman. They don't know our industry, and I think they underestimate.
They can't
the
translate
efficacy.
it.
Yeah, they
Totally.
don't like. Even just like the product to market, like Stamets has a brand, but I've always felt like other mushroom brands were more advanced because they were more heavily in our industry.
Yeah, you have to be in this industry to really be that deep into it. There's only so much you're going to see on PubMed because we've been talking about things that are only just now getting published into PubMed. We've been talking about them for 6-7 years.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of thanks to you and like a lot of the innovators who are behind this. And that's why SupplySide West is like one of those places where we start talking about that. So those guys are brilliant in their world, but there's pieces where you have to be in this world to actually like be on the leading edge.
Like the Reddit comment from earlier.
Oh, yeah,
you got to
go.
know the customer. Yeah. And oftentimes these guys underestimate the customer. They see something in research and they say, oh, well, the manufacturer told me it's going to cost this much. And I don't know if people can even take that much. And if they were on Reddit, they would know people are willing to pay X price point or people are already using doses triple of what you're entering the market into. And oftentimes they just don't know.
Yeah.
Like if Huberman, for example, like I really wish, like, because he's kind of like anti-caffeine to some degree, so he's like focused on like matcha and like he bought that company, yerba mate, and I wish I could show him paraxanthine. You know, it's like, come on, man.
I've tried. I debunked his supplement episode. He had a couple takes in the supplement episode that were just not true, like compliance stuff, regulatory stuff that just weren't true, and. He's at Stanford. He's in his research side, and we're on like the industry side, and it's very hard to bridge that gap. It's one of the reasons we go to ISSN every year.
But again, super brilliant guy, has radically changed. Like for his podcast to be pretty mainstream, has helped all of us massively. Like, you know, I mean, just 5 years ago it was like, you know, Joe Rogan. Maybe 10 years ago it was Tim Ferriss. But for Huberman to be in that mix, wow. Like that's really, it does help our industry a lot. So, for sure, you know, I'm definitely thankful for him and the work that he's doing too.
Yeah, rising tide type situation.
Psilocybin stuff.
How are we? Yeah, I was gonna say, how are we on time? Because if we do have time, it's up to you. You guys have the flights. Okay, we're doing pretty good. Would you mind giving us the psilocybin stack? Or is that like a premium thing that?
Yeah,
or pieces of it at least.
I can go into maybe I can have it as a download. For you guys, sure. You know, I can work on that. I think I think I can do it as ShawnWells.com/stacks.
Do you have? Yeah. Okay.
I believe I can do that, but
are there
I can give it to you. But so Zembrin is in here, and I do believe in the repletion. So I don't like overusing potentially something that has like, you know, SSRI potential, but like I do believe in repletion when you feel low. And there's nothing that's going to be better than like Zembrin to bring you up when you're low. Also combined with something like 5-HTP, which you do hear about a lot. And, you know, someone's like, well, magnesium and 5-HTP. Those are like the things you hear. And certainly electrolytes in particular, magnesium, really important. 5-HTP combined with this would be great, not just indefinitely, but maybe like over a course of a few weeks, definitely. On the acetylcholine front, like depending on if your journey was like maybe a deep work kind of journey, like there's different, this is hard to describe even on mushrooms. Like sometimes it can feel playful and maybe you're dancing and, you know, you're in a cuddle puddle. I don't know. People listening may have no idea what I'm talking about. But sometimes there's like deep work journeys, right? Where you're kind of like really working through like trauma or like a deep thought, like something that's kind of been tied up in your brain that's like literally for years it's been sitting there. And all of a sudden you're like working through it. Now you're going to have a breakthrough. It could be with your business. It could be with like a relationship, whatever it is. Those kinds of things are associated with acetylcholine. So that's that deep work. And having like acetylcholine repletion would be important too. So that would be like I like something like Alcar because acetyl-L-carnitine because you're going to get the acetyl group from that. It also has mitochondrial function. Then having the choline donor, let's say Alpha-GPC, could be good, potentially even CDP choline. And then also having the acetylcholine esterase inhibitor, which would be something like huperzine A, by the way, tetrahydrocurcumin does have that effect as well. Yep. So, you know, those would be some things to replete that. Dopamine and just low energy. We know that paraxanthine is potently dopaminergic, like way better than caffeine. You could add to that like something like Mucuna, you know, so those would be great. And then going back to, again, I like things that potentially are going to calm the nervous system. So that's going to be things like L-theanine, the adaptogens, like Rhodiola, ashwagandha. So, you know, getting something that's high with anolides and certainly Salidroside now in this case. Those are going to be great as well. I'm trying to remember all these ingredients off the top of my head. It's a pretty long list of things, and it's kind of like case by case dependent. Neuroplasticity. So paraxanthine does increase neuroplasticity. We've shown that. But obviously the other things, like in particular, like your polyphenols have been shown to be enhancing neuroplasticity. So you've seen like the green teas and the green coffee berry and, you know, pretty much all the polyphenols like chlorogenic acid and pterostilbene, all these things are going to enhance neuroplasticity. So those would be great. My favorite one, these are kind of, I've been wanting to come out with this, but not really sure on compliance thus far, is 7,8-dihydroxyflavone. Do you guys know about that ingredient?
I've seen it. I have not looked at it.
So there's 7,8-dihydroxyflavone. This is another one of those nootropics depot kind of things, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's its metabolite, which could be actually dramatically even more effective, called 4-DMA dimethylamino 7,8-dihydroxyflavone. That's a long title, but I've actually been using the two of those together, and you do notice it. If you go to Reddit, speaking of Reddit, where these guys really do explore and, you know, do all the crazy nootropic stacks, the 4-DMA 7,8-dihydroxyflavone under the tongue has a dramatic effect. So that would be something to explore. So
can I ask you a question about what you were talking about those for neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
Most people attribute the neuroplasticity boost to the psychedelic itself.
Right. So exactly. So you're going to be in that place, right? Like during your journey, where you're just hyper neuroplastic. Like I could show you scans where like literally like 90% of the brain is like lit up. It looks like a rainbow. And this is why, you know, all those moments when you go, oh my God, like, wow, like you have this epiphany moment, right? Like the serendipitous epiphany moment, and where you literally have your wows or your ahas. That's a new neuronal connection that's happening. And so that's neuroplasticity. Is like these new neurons wiring in a new way. And BDNF not only protects existing neurons, but one thing we used to think like 10, 15 years ago was there wasn't the ability to create new brain cells. We always thought like the brain was what it was. That's not true. Like we know now that like you can create new neurons, especially on psychedelics. Like literally there's a study that shows 10% new neurons, and then with existing neurons, they grew by 10% with a single dose of psilocybin. Like it can be a massive difference. And that was with people with depression. I should preface that. And there's sometimes like essentially atrophy of the brain with depression. There's literally like physiologic differences in the brain. And so that neuroplasticity, if you are out of the journey, is going to be key. And again, like that suppression of ego, that keeping default mode network kind of low or turned off, so to speak, is going to allow for you to make continued changes in the weeks to come. One of the worst things that I believe you can do is leave the journey with your ahas, with your learnings, go back to your previous environment that maybe is not conducive to these new learnings. Maybe like you're in an abusive situation. Maybe you're at a bad job. Maybe you're around toxic people, like whatever the situation is, and you go back to it and you didn't apply the changes. Now, those things that you were kind of unaware of, that were unconscious, are now conscious, but now you're like living the lies.
So
that's like cognitive dissonance, right? Like that's really an unhealthy place to be. So in some ways I worry about like that actually having like, you know, a negative impact. Like if you're not, this is why it's key to not just like, I went to Peru and I did ayahuasca and like I had this like crazy experience and like, yet they didn't do the work. It always comes down to the work. Like, you know, in the months following, you should be working with a therapist, facilitator, someone who is helping you apply those things, keeping you honest, keeping you true, so that you're making those changes in your life, right? And that requires that neuroplasticity. So that's why I'm focused on keeping that elevated as long as you can, because it gives you the best chance to make as many changes as possible before you kind of turn the constructs back on and you kind of get hardwired again.
Do you think it needs to be, do you have to do the work to have a successful journey? Or because you were mentioning cuddle puddles and fun, playful journeys. And I'm not saying that I've ever done psychedelics in my life, but I've felt that I had good experiences with friends where that was nearly as therapeutic.
100%.
You know, like being around friends 100%. And stuff.
100%. I think there are journeys that are like that deeper work. But one thing I noticed was, and I think a lot of people profit from this, and a lot of people stay in this mindset where they feel broken, and then they're seeking continuous healing, and that's not a great place to be. And I was like going to journeys often, and I was like, I need to do work because like I need to do the inner work because I am broken. And I started shifting on that, realizing like I'm going to set my intention to be play because I'm already perfect. And my pivot was like, I believe I'm created perfect by God. And I just have like a buildup of grime, call it micro trauma, whatever you want to call that over time. There's, you know, larger traumas in life. There's micro traumas in life. Some are like, you know, too much too fast in trauma, which is, you know, like those kind of like I witnessed murder, I, you know, experienced rape, or, you know, whatever these things are that could be really terrifying. But also there's too little, too slow, which is like neglect. And we tend to forget about that type of trauma. And so there's also micro trauma, just things that just eat at you and build up over time that you think are kind of small things, but they do add up. Either way, like I'm cleaning off the Ferrari, the Lamborghini that God made, and I'm realizing how beautiful the car is and getting back to where I can focus on me being this perfect instrument of God. And so that's been helpful to shift and like pivot on that thought process. Like, because I was staying in this space where I'm like, I'm broken. I need to go back. I need to keep working on this, to do the inner work. I need to do the work. Like there's some of that, but definitely like sometimes just playing, like getting back to the inner child is powerful.
To me, I really love just the thought that like humans have evolved alongside mushrooms particularly, but definitely different psychedelics, different cultures. And so I look at it as like a maintenance / like synergy between our species. Like I feel like humans need to consume mushrooms to continue moving forward.
It is absolutely fascinating how they communicate. Like that whole thing is mind-boggling. Like they could be a species that in a way is ahead of humanity.
For sure.
The way they communicate, the way they grow, can like span miles. Like it's incredible. And
ahead of humans in the fact that they have kind of hitched a ride on us as well.
Well, I've talked about that with caffeine as well. Like, you know, with Michael Pollan, you know, he has a book called Caffeine, actually. And, you know, Michael Pollan, speaking of which, is a brilliant guy when it comes to psychedelics and really has done a great job at like educating the mainstream. Like he's an amazing dude. How to Change Your Mind is a great book and a series on Netflix. Definitely encourage you to check that out. Really love that guy. But in his book, he basically talks about with caffeine, it's a come at a cost ingredient, whereas I believe paraxanthine is not. But also what could be interesting is paraxanthine caffeine is in plants to be a toxin to bugs, like repel bugs. Mm-hmm. And it could be that it's an addictive substance so that we become dependent on it. We plant it more. We put it all over the planet. And maybe it's like a way to like, one, increase the growth of these plant species, and two, a way to repel bugs. You know, it could be really interesting where there is like a essentially codependence, right?
I've theorized that exact same thing. Like caffeine is this gift to us for performing some work for them. Like it's even though it is an insecticide.
We talk a lot about, Mike and I privately talk a lot about like just I don't know, big philosophy of nutrition and stuff. And sometimes we'll talk about like how a lot of the things that we consume in fruits and vegetables are toxins that are meant to hurt us. But then when you extract them, they do a lot of great things for us. And
well, there's also hormesis, right? Like it's all about the dose, right? So there's so many cases of that where, you know, like even metformin or, you know, possibly even like berberine or dihydroberberine, potentially like at certain doses could have, you know, people have theorized, oh, you know, like might stress the mitochondria, and that's okay. Like, because it's actually making the mitochondria more resilient and like initiating mitochondrial biogenesis, right? Like actually creating more mitochondria. Like if it's not being exposed to some kind of stress, then it's getting weaker. Like that's where hormesis is like a really important idea, where we grow stronger through the adaptation. And like even when you look at plants, like, you know, when you look at like these dry farms wines, right? Like where like a Texas climate where it's more arid, the soil's more depleted, these grapes that grow here are going to have the xenohormesis where they have more antioxidants, right? They're stronger, they're more resilient. And then there's actually more benefit to us as a result. They're actually lower in sugar and all those kinds of things. So, you know, that's exciting too. Like I do think there's benefit to that stress.
Mm-hmm. I believe in that.
Excellent. So to sum it up, it sounds like you shouldn't go on some epic type of journey if you're not really willing to like do the work and make changes that are needed. Otherwise, you're just going to end up living in your own like living hell almost.
Potentially. I mean, I don't want to like, you know, put that thought in everyone's head and make that a reality. But yes, I do think that, you know, you should have real concern because these are powerful substances. I also do believe in the set and setting, you know, concept where you have to have the right mindset going in, and you have to feel safe with the facilitator and the setting. If it does not feel right to you, then don't go into that setting. It doesn't matter if, like, I've been through over 100 journeys and I feel very comfortable potentially being a facilitator for some. At the same time, I could be the nicest guy, I could be the right person, but if this woman, let's say, is coming in and she's had experiences with sexual trauma, assault, or whatever, she's like, and that's her first journey, probably shouldn't be with a guy.
Right.
It should be with a woman, maybe a woman that has experience in that area. And then maybe like down the road, it should be like with a married couple that's very safe as she starts to work towards safety around the masculine. And maybe down the road, it would make sense. But like, this is the kind of thing where you have to trust your intuition. And that's something that, you know, we've turned off greatly. So it's really important to listen to that inner voice, you know, be it God, be it, you know, the universe, be it yourself, like whatever you feel there. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, fully agreed. Sometimes we talk about open water swimming, and I tell people ocean swimming, if you get the willies, just get the F out. Like there's, you have to, you can't explain it, you know, but sometimes you just feel something's wrong and just get out.
It's a great point. I'll wrap on this because I could talk about this for hours, and I do usually. So the more safe you feel, that's when you can like really get out there on that lifeline, like where, you know, think of the deep sea diver, you know, the oxygen hose, or you know, also like the, you know, the guy in space, right? That has that tether, and you can get much further out. The safer you feel, you can lean in. You're in that parasympathetic, you can lean in, and you can get these incredible experiences. Like that's when you can get the deepest most spiritual changes. And if you're in a state where you're not feeling that safe, one, you could be ironing in trauma, new trauma, which is not good. But two, you might just be in sympathetic the whole time. And you're like, I don't even know why I'm not feeling anything. I think I need to go take more or whatever. It's literally like if you were drunk and someone like fell and like split their head open, you wouldn't feel drunk at all. It's like, boom, like you're like turned back on, like all the, cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine's flooding in. You're like, I'm ready to go. Like that's the adrenals, like that's sympathetic nervous system. You can override the experience. The same is true, like if you really lean in where you really are comfortable, really in parasympathetic, you can have a much deeper experience. And I think a lot of people don't even know how to get into those spaces. And that does take work outside of psychedelics, knowing how to do meditation, grounding, that kind of stuff. And you can get these deeper, more spiritual experiences.
That speaks to us as a society. People looking for the magic pill to fix their problems without wanting to do the work before they take the pill that takes them to the next level.
Agreed.
I have a lot to talk about off the podcast. So.
Ben's ready to close it out and add some Salidroside in there. SalidroPure. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been a great trip.
We're also coming out with SalidroPure.
No. You were like, really? FTC, he's kidding.
That's Ben.
He's kidding.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much. We will see you at SupplySide West.
See you guys soon.